For this pattern, you will need 98 yards, 90 meters of your main color, and you will also need 25 yards, 23 meters of your contrasting color. This pattern requires worsted weight yarn, and worsted is sometimes called medium number 4 yarn in big box stores, and I believe in the UK worsted is called Aran, and in Australia it's called 10 ply. The sample uses I Love This yarn, which is 355 yards per 200 grams. And my main color was Rosy Cheeks, and my contrasting color was Ivory. So you'll need a set of US 8 5mm needles in the 16-inch 40cm circumference. You will also need a set of rib needles that are 1 to 2 sizes smaller than your gauge needle for the brim, and that will also need to be in 16-inch 40cm circumference. And in addition to that, you will also need longer cord lengths or DPNs for your gauge needles so that you can work the crown decreases. This pattern is written for one size. It will result in a hat that is 20.5 inches, 52 centimeters around by 8 inches, 20.5 centimeters long. This only gives you about ½ an inch negative ease for an average female head circumference. And I did this so that you don't stretch the colorwork section too much and lose the definition of the stitches. And the gauge is worked in that colorwork section. You work your colorwork section for your gauge. You'll need to cast on a multiple of 10, so 10, 20, 30, something like that. And that will result in a 17.5 stitches by 23 rounds equals 4 inches. Here's the chart for the colorwork section if you are interested in that. And then I also have written instructions here as well so that you can kind of look ahead. We'll refer back to this later on. So to begin this hat, we're going to start out with some ribbing. So you'll want to cast on using your rib needles, which should be 1 to 2 sizes smaller than your gauge needles. Now, if you don't have that size needle, you can always just start out with a few less stitches and then increase them in the first couple of rows before your color work. So we need to do the invisible join in the round. So you start out with 1 extra stitch. So we start out with 91. And after our invisible join in the round, we will have 90 stitches. So you lose 1 in the process. So to begin, you're going to want to have the side that is attached to your ball of yarn. These were my last cast on stitches, and these were my first cast on stitches here. I need to make sure that my cast on's not twisted. It's twisted right here, so I need to fix that. Now you can see that it's not twisted. The inside edge has my cast on edge there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the first cast on stitch I have, which is on my left hand, right? It's not attached to my working yarn. I'm going to take that and slip it purlwise to my right hand needle. So go into it from right to left as if to purl, but just slip it to your right hand needle. And then we take our last cast on stitch here, which is the second on our right hand needle. We pull it over that slip stitch and off the needle. So you can use your needle or you can just use your fingers. So I just grab it, pull it over that slip stitch and off. And then I pull on both tails to tighten up my work. And then I place a marker for my beginning of round, and I'm ready to work in rib. So you want to work in 1 by 1 rib for about 1 inch, and then we will be switching to our gauge needle. When it comes time to switch to your gauge needle, you can either slip all your stitches from your rib needle to your gauge needle, or you can just knit off onto the new needle. Either way will work. Go ahead and work 2 plain rounds after your ribbing, and make sure that you have switched to your gauge needle by this point because we're about to start on the color work. So go ahead and do all that, and I'll meet you back here for your color work section. I want to mention quickly that there is something called yarn dominance in colorwork. Grabbing a strand above another or below another pretty much determines how prominent that color is. So you can tell that some of the stitches here are not as prominent as others, like this one right here is a little bit harder to see. It sits back in the work a little bit more than others. So I just picked up whichever yarn was easiest and prevented my balls of yarn from getting tangled. If you want the contrasting color to always be the most dominant in your color work, you should look up yarn dominance in color work. I'm not an expert on it, so I'm not going to really teach you about it. I'm just going to do what's fastest and most convenient, because in the end I think it still looks pretty great. So now that you're done with the ribbed portion in your plain rows, it's time to start on the color work. Disclaimer, I am not very good at color work. It's not my strong suit. This is the first bit of color work I've done in a really long time. So what I can create is not perfect, and my techniques are not perfect either. So I'm going to show you kind of 2 options for how you can hold your yarn, but I definitely encourage you to try out multiple options and look up other tutorials on how to do color work. So we have a 19 row color work repeat. I have written instructions on screen here, so you can pause, screenshot it, or write it down. And then I also have a chart, which I'm going to show you here. Now, if you've never read a chart, it's really simple. It's read from right to left, from bottom to top. So in the bottom right-hand corner, next to those two boxes where they both say 1, that's the first stitch of your row and the first row of your repeat. It's a 10 stitch repeat because on the bottom you can see it goes from 1 to 10, and it's a 19 row repeat because at the bottom it goes from 1 to 19 bottom to top. The white boxes are your main color, so here it's my pink, and the dark gray boxes are my contrasting color, which will be this white. Every stitch in this colorwork section is knit. There's no purling, there's nothing special, it's just all knit. So if we look at our first row, the first two boxes, again, we're reading it from right to left. The first two boxes are white, so you're going to knit 2 in your main color. And then we have 1 gray box, so we're going to knit 1 with our contrasting color. And then we have 4 of our white boxes, so knit 4 in your main color. And then 1 in your gray, so knit 1 contrasting color. And then you end with a knit 2 in your main color. So that is how it's written out. So here we're at the start of our row. And our first row is a knit 2 main color, knit 1 contrasting color, knit 4 main color, knit 1 contrasting, knit 2 main color. We're just going to knit the first 2 normally with our main color, and then we need to knit 1 with our contrasting color. So I'm going to grab my contrasting color. I need to create tension. So I'm going to wrap it around a finger on my right hand because I'm a continental knitter. So I technically hold the yarn in my left hand. If you hold the yarn in your right hand, you can tension it around a finger on your left hand. I'm essentially just going to drop my main color, pick up my contrasting color. So it doesn't really matter that much, but my contrasting color is behind my main color. And I'm just going to knit 1. So I just knit 1 with that contrasting color, and then I drop it, and I pick up the main color. So it looks like this from behind. I just drop the white, which is my contrasting, and pick up my main, and I'm going to knit 4. So try and keep your tension normal. There we go. And now I can drop it and pick up the contrasting color. So you're going to have to create a float. This contrasting color is not attached to any of these 4. So it's going to have a float where it's attached like this. It'll have a float, just a piece of string behind the work. It's totally normal. That's what color work looks like. Again, I drop my main color, pick up my contrasting color, and I'm going to knit 1. So you don't want to pull really tight. You want to kind of have enough string to bridge the gap. So you have a gap here in between your last contrasting color and the one you're about to knit. So you have to bridge the gap here. You want it to be loose enough that these stitches can lay flat, but not too loose that this one stitch is just kind of looking a little bit weird. I would definitely err on the looser side. If it's too tight, these stitches will bunch up together and it will be very hard to put your hat on. I just kind of hold it normally, knit the stitch, wrap it around, pull through, and then if you want, you can kind of just pull apart here to make sure that that float is long enough. You see how that float is not pulled tight? Now I can let go of my tension yarn because I don't really need it anymore. This stitch will be loose because you need to weave in your ends. So after you weave in your ends in the very end of your project, it won't be loose anymore. That's our second contrasting color. So now we need to knit 2 in our main color. So drop my contrasting color and I just pick up my main color. And it kind of looks like this. So now I need to knit 2. And that's it. That is your 10 stitch repeat. Do you see how what is on our needles right now looks like the first row in our chart? That's exactly what the chart is there for, to give you a visual representation of what your row is supposed to look like. So it's only 10 stitches of this row, and then we just repeat it. So you'll notice that our first 2 stitches of our repeat are a main color knit 2. So we're going to do that. So there will essentially be, apart from the first 2 stitches and the last 2 stitches of your row, there will be 4 main colors in between every contrasting color. So we've knit 4, we need to drop our yarn and pick up our contrasting color. And be sure that you have the one attached to your ball and not your starting string. So remember, we have to bridge the gap here of these 4 stitches. And you want to kind of even out these stitches, make sure they're not bunched up. If they're bunched up like that, there's not going to be enough of a float. So you want to stretch them out so that they look about right. Insert into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through. And if you need to, you can pull this apart to make that float a little bit longer. But you can see that my floats are a good length. It's not causing any puckering, so I can drop it, pick up my main color, and knit 4. Now I can drop my main color, pick up my contrasting color. Remember to stretch those out on your right hand needle and knit it, but don't knit it super tightly. Drop it, pick up your main color, and knit 2. And that's the end of our second repeat. You're just going to go ahead and work that repeat until the end of your row. What I sometimes do, and this will be for continental knitters, you'll have to look up a separate instruction if you are a thrower. I just go ahead and pinch these 2 strands of yarn in my last 2 fingers, which is similar to how I just hold it when I'm knitting anyway. I take my middle finger and I split them. The contrasting color in the back and the main color in the front. It can be the opposite way if you prefer. And then this is just how I knit. And you'll notice that my contrasting color is loose. So I just go around to the back and pull on the tail that's attached to the yarn, and it tightens that tension up. And then after 4 main colors, I go into the next. We're going to take our right hand needle and only pick up the contrasting color and then pull through to complete that stitch. So you can do that and just keep going on down the line using the front strand for your main color. If it's too loose, you can just go ahead and pull on it to retension it and then knit that back. Row 2 is very similar, but you're going to have one long section of your main color. So we're going to have to kind of catch our floats, I believe is what it's called. For our repeat, if we look at our chart, again, reading from right to left, our first one is a white colored block. So that's a knit 1 in your main color, and then knit 3 in your contrasting color, and then knit 6 in your main color. Again, you can hold them like this and then just, pick which one you need, or you can just do it one at a time. I think it's easier starting out if you do it just one at a time. So we're going to knit our first stitch with our main color. So I just pick up the main color, knit the first stitch. And then the next 3 are contrasting colors. So I just drop it, and behind it I pick up my contrasting color. And there are 3 stitches in between our last contrasting color. Remember to spread them out and don't knit too tightly, but knit the next 3. So this one looks really weird because it's our first one. If I pull on the first tail, it'll kind of clean that up. So after we knit 3, it's time to knit 6 in our main color. So I just drop it and pick up our main color in front. And now I'm going to knit 6. And so that is an awfully long float to carry behind your work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to catch it somewhat halfway through. So I'm going to knit 3 stitches. Now you can knit 3, 4, or 5 stitches before you catch it. Doesn't really matter. I wouldn't go any further than 5 without catching it. So again, this is something I'm not great at and I don't have very much experience with. We have our 2 strands of yarn here, is I'm going to twist them so that we catch this white strand or a contrasting color strand so that the float is not over 7 stitches. Because we have 6 at the end of our repeat and 1 at the beginning of our repeat. So it'll be 7 total main color stitches. So you can look it up for yourself, but I don't know if it matters if you go contrasting over main like this or contrasting under main. I go over because it's just a simpler motion. I take the contrasting strand and pull it over the main like this. Hold it underneath. And then I continue knitting the rest of my repeat. So I'm still using my main color, but I've just twisted that contrasting color. And you want to be careful not to twist it too tight. So I'm not pulling tightly on my contrasting color, I just twisted it. And now I've only knit 3 of the 6 stitches for the rest of my repeat. So I'm going to knit 3 more in my main color. So there we have it, that's 6 total. And that is the end of our 10 stitch repeat. So now the beginning of it is to knit 1 in our main color, knit 3 in our contrasting color, and then knit 6 in our main color again. We have 1 final stitch to knit with our main color, and then we can drop it. And there are 2 ways you can do this. So if you'll notice, our strands are kind of twisted because we did intentionally twist them. So now I'm going to just pick up this contrasting color. In order to slightly untwist our strands, I'm going to pick it up underneath and knit 3. So remember, we caught our float about here and we have all these stitches to go over. So we want to just kind of gently make sure that they're spread out evenly and knit the next 3 just normally. You don't want to pull too tight. I've almost untwisted my strings, so I'm going to pick up my main color from underneath my contrasting color just so that my strands remain untwisted, and I'm going to knit 6. So I'm going to stop halfway through, about 3 or 4 stitches, whichever you prefer, and then I'm going to twist them. So again, I bring my contrasting color over my main color. You don't have to pull tight on your contrasting color, but you just keep knitting until you've knit a total of 6 stitches, and that is your second repeat. So now I'm going to start my repeat overs. So go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here for round 3. So for round 3, you're going to have way more contrasting color than you will your main color. So you're going to knit 5 in your contrasting color, knit 1 main, 1 contrasting, 1 main, 1 contrasting, 1 main. So we're doing the bulk of our heart with this row. I haven't worked my contrasting color since these 3 stitches. So my contrasting color, I caught the float right here. So if you need to, you can kind of untangle your balls of yarn. So what I'm going to start with is 5 of my contrasting color. My yarn's twisted, so to untwist it, I'm going to pick up the contrasting color underneath my main color, but you can do it however you like, over or under. And now I'm going to knit 5 with my contrasting color. So just go ahead and start doing that. So now we're going to alternate main color, contrasting main color, contrasting main color for the next 5 stitches. You can catch your main color halfway through this set of contrasting colors, but I think 5 stitches is my max that I'm going to allow a float. So I've got 5 stitches, and I'm just going to drop my contrasting color. I'm going to pick up my main color, and remember to kind of spread out your stitches on your right hand needle so that they are not clumped together. I'm going to alternate, so knit 1 main, drop, pick up contrasting, knit 1 contrasting, drop, pick up main, drop, pick up contrasting, drop, pick up main. And that's your repeat. So we're knitting our heart here, and then we're knitting kind of our smaller motif on the left. So now it's time to start the repeat again. So again, you can hold them all in the same hand, grab them with both, middle finger to separate them. I put the contrasting color in the back, but you can do it whichever way you prefer. So only grabbing the contrasting color, knit 5. And I make sure that they are evenly spread out across my right hand needle when I go to knit my next main color one. So you don't want to pull tight, just knit normally. Knit 1 main, 1 contrasting, 1 main, 1 contrasting, and 1 main. You can kind of stretch it out if you need to get those floats to be normal length. Here's what it starts to look like in the back. That is row 3. So just go ahead and work that repeat until you get to the end of the row, and I'll meet you back here for row 4. For round 4, you're going to knit 5 stitches in your contrasting color and then 5 stitches in your main color. So we're going to get pretty long floats here. If you want, you can kind of catch a float every couple of stitches instead of going the full 5, but I have not found any trouble with my floats so far. They're long enough that I can still stretch the hat to put it on my head, so I'm not worried about it. So I'm just going to go ahead and knit 5 with my contrasting color, and then I can drop that and pick up the other color. So remember to stretch out your stitches on your right hand needle to make sure they're not clumped, and then knit 5 in your main color. And then you just repeat that process. So I drop my yarn, pick up my contrasting color, make sure my stitches are spread out on my right hand needle, and knit 5 again. Drop it, spread them out on my right hand needle, and knit 5 in my main color. So we have just worked 2 repeats of our stitch pattern. And this is what it looks like. The floats are longer, but they're still flat against my hat and they're not making the stitches pucker or anything. So that is round 4. Go ahead and work that across the entire row, and I'll meet you back here for round 5. So for round 5, we're going to be finishing up our heart. It's a knit 2 contrasting, knit 1 main, knit 2 contrasting, knit 2 main, knit 1 contrasting, knit 2 main. We're going to knit 2 with our contrasting color, knit 1 with our main color, knit 2 with our contrasting, knit 2 with our main, knit 1 with our contrasting, knit 2 with our main. We kind of separate the two halves of our heart with one main color there, and that is your 10 stitch repeat. So go ahead and work that all the way around, and I'll meet you back here for round 6. And round 6 is just a plain knit row. So you just drop the contrasting color and knit one round completely in your main color. So go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here for round 7. Row 7 is the same as row 1. You knit 2 main, 1 contrasting, 4 main, 1 contrasting, 2 main. My yarn is attached to the row below, so I'm just going to knit normally and not pull very tight. So 2 main, 1 contrasting, and then 4 main. Make sure my stitches are stretched on my right hand needle, 1 contrasting, and 2 main. That is row 7. Go ahead and work that all the way around, and I'll meet you back here for round 8. So for round 8, you're going to knit 1 main, knit 1 contrasting 2 times for a total of 4 stitches. And then you're going to knit 2 main, knit 1 contrasting, knit 1 main twice. So for 4 stitches. So for row 8, knit 1 main, knit 1 contrasting, and you do that twice. And then you knit 2 main, knit 1 contrasting, knit 1 main, knit 1 contrasting, knit 1 main, and that's it. That is your entire row. So go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here for round 9. For round 9, it's mostly your main color, so knit 2 main, 1 contrasting, 4 main, 1 contrasting, 2 main. This is the exact same pattern as round 1 and round 7. You can go ahead and rewind back to that point if you need a refresher. And then round 10 is just a plain knit round for your main color. And after that, rows 11 through 19 are virtually the same, just shifted over. So you're knitting the hearts the same, and the decorations in between the hearts are the same. Everything's just shifted over. So in your first section right here, you start with a heart, and then you do the smaller motif. And then for the second part, you start with the smaller motif and then do the heart so that they alternate. So if you're not comfortable with that, after row 10, you can just repeat rounds 1 through 9 if you want the hearts to stack, or if you want to be able to just watch the video on how to do it exactly. But since I've given you the basics, I'm going to go ahead and set you free to finish the rest of the colorwork section. So it's 19 rows in total. So go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here for your crown decreases. We've done all of our color work, and you can now cut your contrasting color. You won't need it anymore for the rest of the hat. So we're going to work 1 plain row, so you just knit in your main color. The whole rest of your hat will be in your main color. So you're going to knit 1 plain row, just knit around, and then we start decreasing. At some point, you are going to have to switch to either double pointed needles or magic loop. It's possible to do it on 16-inch circulars. I've done it in the past, but it puts strain on your knitting needles, and it puts strain on your final stitches and kind of stretches them out. If you truly have nothing else to use, you don't have another cord length needle, you can make it work by just kind of doing a makeshift magic loop. You know, you pull out 1 needle all the way and then knit across as many stitches as you can, and then kind of just do a makeshift magic loop. But for the purpose of this, we're going to show you with magic loop. The color work will look a little wonky right now. It looks a little bit uneven, and the stitches are puckering a little bit. That's because I haven't blocked it. Again, I'm not perfect at this. This is one of my blocked versions. So you can see that the hearts really stand out a lot more once it's been blocked. I'm going to walk you through some of your decrease rows. They're all very, very simple. We have 9 sections of 10 stitches. So if you find it helpful, you could place a stitch marker after every 10 stitches or after every decrease repeat. That way you don't have to keep track. So I'm not going to do that, but if you did, you would just work a knit 2 together, knit 8, place a marker, and do that all the way around. So if you've never done a knit 2 together, it's just essentially you knit 2 stitches as if they were 1. So you go into the next 2 stitches, into the front loops of both of them, like this. Yarn over from front to back, pull a loop through, and slide off. And now you knit 8. And you just do that all the way around. So if I wanted to place another marker, I would do it right here, but you want your markers to be different from your beginning of round, or at least place something special here, like a removable stitch marker or a piece of string, so that you know that this is your beginning of round. So you just do this all the way around. Knit 2 together, knit 8. And you just do that all the way around, and then you knit 2 rows plain. So rounds 2 and 3 are just knit all the way around, no decreases. You should have 81 stitches at the end of the round. Go ahead and knit those 3 rounds, and I'll meet you back here for round 4. So now you're ready for round 4, which is another decrease round. So what I've done is I've placed a removable stitch marker in the fabric underneath the general area of my decrease. So my decrease was right here, and just a little ways below it, I put a stitch marker. So that way I can just kind of remind myself when I get close to that area that, oh yeah, I need to decrease. So our next decrease round for round 4 is a knit 2 together, knit 7. So it's the same as before. So we just go into the first 2 stitches as if to knit, yarn over, pull through, slide off, and then you knit 7. And we do that all the way around. So go ahead and do that until the end of the row, and you should end up with 72 stitches. And for rounds 5 and 6, you're just going to knit around. So go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here for round 7. So we're up to round 7, and from here on out until the very end, pretty much, it follows a very similar pattern. And my stitches are not feeling stretched yet. If your stitches are starting to feel very, very stretched, like stretched really wide like this on your needles, it's time to switch to either DPNs or magic loop. Mine are not feeling stretched yet. I think I could go another 1 or 2 decrease rounds, but I want to show you what to do if you get to that point. So you can slip them if you want, or you can knit them onto the new needle. Slipping them might be a little bit easier, but it's also slower in my opinion. So my beginning of round marker fell off, but it was right here. So I reached the end of my round. I'm going to remove it, and I'm going to slide my stitches off of my right hand needle a little bit, and I'm going to grab my new needles, my new cord length needles here. I'm going to knit off of my current left hand needle onto a needle of my new cord length. You can do this on a plain round, you can do this on a decrease round, doesn't matter. Might be easier on a plain round, but I'm going to show you with a decrease round. So for round 7, we knit 2 together, so into the first 2 stitches, yarn over, pull through, slide off, and then we knit 6. So after I insert my needle into the next stitch, I'm going to pull a little bit just to tighten up any gaps between our 2 needles. Then yarn over, pull through, slide off. So now that we've knit 6, it's time to decrease. So knit 2 together again, and then knit 6. Do that a couple more times. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 sections on my current new needle. There are 9 sections in total, so you're going to have 4 sections on one half of your magic loop and 5 sections on the other. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to pull on my right needle, which is the long cord length, and then I'm going to flip my work. So turn your work. So now it looks a little bit weird. Here's my old set of needles, and on the back side is my new set of needles. So I slide them up on my old set and continue knitting with my new set here. So knit 2 together, insert my needle into the next stitch, and I pull tight because I want there to be no gap between my 2 halves of my magic loop. Yarn over, pull through, slide off. So that's one of our 6 stitches, and you just keep sliding them up onto your left hand needle. One final knit 2 together, 5, 6. So now we have knit off of our 16-inch circulars, and we have all of our stitches on our new cord length. It looks like this. Go ahead and turn your work. So while this is optional to kind of label where your decreases are, you'll want to place a removable stitch marker in the fabric of your front side of your magic loop. So I know that when I start a new round, this is the side that I start on. So when I see this red marker, I know I've finished one row and I'm ready to work on the next. If you've never done magic loop before, we've kind of already done it with this introduction, but what you do is you slide your stitches up onto your front needle. Okay, the one that's closest to me. And you pull out the back needle. You want to leave yourself a little bit of room on the left side here at the end of your first needle, but you want to have enough cord on your right side that you can knit with. For round 8, we just knit around, so I knit the first stitch normally, and every time I start knitting across a new needle, I go into the second stitch normally, pull tight on the yarn, and then knit it normally. And I do this because I don't want there to be any gap between my current stitches and the stitches on my back needle. We just keep knitting across our whole entire needle, and you're just going to knit off every stitch on your left hand needle. And once you have, you can go ahead and turn your work. So now you need to kind of push this cord so that you can slide your stitches onto your closer needle, and your yarn is kind of in between both of your needles, and pull out the back needle. Again, you want a little bit of cord length at the left side and enough cord length on the right side that you can work with. We've only done half of our row, right? Because we're not back to where that red little marker was. I need to knit every stitch off of this needle. So knit one. And remember, when I go into the second stitch, I just pull tight, yarn over, pull through, slide off. And you do that so you don't get any weird gaps in between your needles. And you just knit off every stitch, and then you can turn your work. So now we're back to that red marker, so we know that we've finished one complete row and we're ready to start the next one. So that was round 8. Round 9 is another plain round. And then here are the rest of the rows in your crown. They're very similar to what we've been doing, so I'm not going to walk you through them. So once you finish your 18th round, you should have 9 stitches left. I have 4 on the front needle and 5 on the back, but the orientation of that does not matter. So go ahead and cut your yarn, leaving a tail about 8 to 12 inches, and then thread that tail through a yarn needle. So with my first needle facing me, the one that has our beginning of round marker, I'm going to take my yarn and thread my yarn needle with the yarn through the final stitches. Thread through a couple, pull through. Thread through a couple, pull through. And now you can pull on this needle and turn your work. You want the tip of your needle to be closest to your right side here. So then you go through, thread off, pull the yarn through, thread off, pull the yarn through. So now we have the top of our hat looks like this. I'm going to pull on the tail yarn to kind of close that top. And then we take our needle and we thread through the smaller hole at the top of your hat. Pull the yarn through and turn your hat inside out. So at the very top of our hat here, we want to pull tight again to close it. Do you see the circle around the hole at the top? All of these are our final stitches. So we want to secure the top of our hat. So what I do is I pull tight, and then I'm going to go around that hole again a few times, but also pick up a couple stitches that were maybe a row or two below our final row. Doesn't matter if you go clockwise or counterclockwise, doesn't matter. So I'm going to grab a stitch here that was a row or two below to kind of secure my stitch. Then I'm going to grab a couple of those final stitches, pull through, grab a stitch that was not one of my finals, and another that wasn't one of my final stitches. And then I grab a couple of the final stitches. And I just go around in a circle, grabbing a couple that were my final and 1 or 2 that was not. And I pull tight after each time to make sure the top of that hat stays closed. And you just do this once or twice. And then you can cut your yarn. And there you have it. You've closed the top of your hat. Here's what the top of your hat should look like. Something like this. And you're done. So now you can remove any stitch markers that you have and weave in any of your ends, and then you'll want to block your hat. So what I did is I just laid mine flat. If I needed to just kind of go like this a little bit to get the color work to look better, I did, but I didn't really pin it out and stretch it far. Just kind of laid it mostly flat on its own. So that's how you knit the Valentine's hat. I hope you guys found this video helpful and that you enjoyed making this pattern. If you did, please let me know in the comments. And if you want to see more videos like this, along with podcasts and tutorials, please subscribe. There will be more coming soon.